In December 2019, a 16-year-old chess prodigy from Iran by the name of Alireza Firouzja sat down opposite the reigning world champion and #1 Magnus Carlsen to play a blitz game in the World Championships. Now, this turned out to be the most controversial game they've ever played because after it was finished, it culminated in Alireza writing this appeal letter and submitting it to FIDE at a cost of $300. So what on earth happened to cause this? Well, first we need to look at the game itself, because the final position led to the controversy and the drama thereafter. So let's dive into this one. Alireza with white, he kicks off with e4, Magnus e5. We now see knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Spanish game, and now a6 kicks the bishop, Alireza drops back, and d6 now from Magnus is a more unusual move. You see knight f6 much more commonly, and we'll see now that he's looking to set up a closed pawn structure after c3, preparing d4 from Alireza, classic plan. Magnus goes g6. So it's a kind of King's Indian-y modern defense setup here. We see d4 now on the board, bishop g7, h3, standard looking move, the knight develops, and now this bishop just tucks back voluntarily, covers this pawn, and Magnus castles the king. So both players now bring their rooks to the e-file. Alireza develops his knight, all very standard development, and he doesn't want to go too fast with d5 by the way, or Magnus will drop his knight back, look for the kind of classic f5 King's Indian style pawn break. Now queen e7 from Magnus, and this is a really nice manoeuvre actually, we'll see the purpose in just a moment. So knight f1 played, coming around to g3, standard plan, and now queen f8 looks really weird, but after knight g3, here's the point. Bishop h6, trying to exchange those dark squared bishops, because that's Magnus's bad bishop. It sits on the same colour pawns as the ones in the centre, so he's trying to exchange off, and Alireza doesn't accept. He goes knight g5. Really instructive use of the space here from Alireza, not exchanging pieces too fast and just maintaining this bind in the centre. So Magnus just waits. He drops back with his knight. The bishop now bounces back to this diagonal, looking down at the king. The knight comes into e6, and now h4 is played, cementing this knight because it's pressured once again, and we see Magnus just waiting, not wanting to change pawn structure or change pieces. Now bishop e3, Alireza continues his development, just squeezing Magnus. Magnus waits again. Now the pawn kicks on, gaining yet more space. And now Magnus bounces back with the bishop, looks weird, but it's no longer defended with the pawn. And here we see it defended with queen c1, and Magnus goes on a counter-attack, looking to pick up this bishop pair. And now Alireza, he makes a mistake. So he should just drop back with this bishop and maintain it on the diagonal, defend this knight. But what he does instead is take on e6. Now he hits the queen, so there's no time for the bishop to be taken, but what he'll have overlooked was Magnus's next move. So what do you think is the best move in this position for black? So the move to play is not bishop takes, which looks really natural, because then Alireza has time to take here, and everything's okay, white keeps an edge, but instead pawn takes. And the trick is, now if you take on h6, well, you've left the protection here, the queen crashes through, king goes, and you pick up this knight. And because you're threatening mate, the rook's coming to the f-file, everything like that, white's not long for this world, it's going to soon be game over. So Alireza didn't have time to take, he had to defend the f-pawn, but now Magnus can crash through on e3. Now he could have taken here like this, kept this monster knight, and then there's a really nice plan to invade with the queen, look to deliver mate. That's very uncomfortable. But instead he takes with this one, very logical idea to keep the bishop pair, keep all this pressure, but at least Alireza can try and unravel a bit now without getting checkmated. So he takes on g6, pawn recaptures, queen d2, connects the rooks, prepares to challenge the f-file, and Magnus just plays a bit slowly now. His best was to immediately come with g5, start pressuring this knight, start pressuring this pawn, but he takes here first, this pawn recaptures, and then he just moves with the king, wastes the tempo. Alireza gets time to double on this file. Magnus comes with the rook. We see this double up, now takes here, rook recaptures, rook f8, but queen c3 now comes from Alireza. He's just got time to start creating some counter threats. Now this pawn's under fire and the time's getting low. Look at Magnus's clock. He uses about 20 seconds here. He's now very uncomfortable. He plays c6. Now Alireza has time to backpedal with the knight, and he's not too worried if Magnus wants to repair these pawns. The king will be safe enough. So instead we see e5 from Magnus, but this is a risky move because Alireza now takes. The king recaptures and he goes queen to c4 here, creating this deadly battery and threatening mate. Now the best move for Magnus to defend here was not what he played. He should have gone queen to g7, covering this square, because now if white takes this pawn here, well, there's time to flick in this pawn to b5 move, and we'll see the relevance of that in a moment. The queen has to go, and then you can take back, and black's okay. But what Magnus does is queen f6. What's the key difference? Oh, and as I'm drawing here, by the way, it's to give his king a square on e7 if white were to check. But what's the key difference now? Well, when takes here occurs, there's no time for b5, kicking the queen, because your own queen's about to drop. That's a lot better for white. So the pawn was recaptured, and now we get this queen to b4 check. So Magnus blocks with the pawn. This is the best move. Alireza takes on b7. He's hitting this bishop. It jumps away to b5, looking to pick up this knight on f1, but now we have check. The king goes, and now another pawn drops. And remember this moment because it's going to feature later on in this video. So the king's in check. Magnus blocks with the queen. That is the best move. And now Alireza, he swaps the queens. His best actually was queen c3, keeping them on the board, keeping attacking. But okay, this one played, king recaptures, and now bishop f7. And this endgame looks truly hopeless. 2 pawns down. What can Magnus conjure up? Well, he takes on f1 first. Very interesting decision to give up the bishop pair. But the idea now is that you've got the opposite coloured bishops. Possibly there's drawing chances. So he saves this g-pawn. The king now marches in. The bishop drops back. Here comes the king. King e7 hits the bishop. It drops. The pawn is hit, kicks on to a5. And now here we see Magnus just do a ton of shuffling. I mean, look at his pawns, all on dark squares. His bishop's going nowhere. All he can do is shuffle while Alireza brings in the king. And now we see his pawns marching up the board, including on the queen side. Nothing Magnus can do. He's powerless to prevent this, just purely shuffling. And now here Magnus makes the move to pick up that queenside pawn. But Alireza comes back. We see this exchange. King c5, Alireza goes, and now Magnus can only shuffle around behind. The players are so low on time here. Magnus comes for this pawn, and it is a blunder. The eval bar goes nuts, because you can go king d7 or king f7 here, and you can even give this whole bishop to run through the pawn. This is the idea. You have to block, then you go. Bishop takes, king takes, and although the king's rounding up this pawn, this is a 1 king and pawn endgame. But okay, not easy to see that. Alireza just advances his pawn, very sensible. Now the bishop comes, the king goes, preparing to advance the e-pawn, also hitting this one, and now Magnus doesn't try and defend it, because then this one's running way too fast, supported by the king. So instead we see the king marching round towards the e-file. Now the pawn goes on, king comes, Alireza comes with his king, threatening this and queening the pawn, etc. So again the king, it comes round in front, but now he steps back, picks up another pawn. That's 3 pawns ahead. King e7, king h5, bishop d2, and now the pawn kicks on, bishop f4, and here Alireza, he makes a mistake. He has a win. The move he should play is pawn g4. How do you stop this going through? Well, bishop here is the best move to try, but then king h6 comes and you just can't stop it. If you come back with the king, well, now there are simple tactics. You can either push on with this one with check first, after the king goes, then g7, or you can do it in different orders. You know, you could play the king here first, but the point being, you just can't stop all these pawns from going through. This is a completely one endgame. This pawn's going to win it. So that was the winning plan, pushing on with g6. But instead we see the king step backwards, hit this bishop, and now there are drawing techniques here for Magnus using a blockade on the dark squares. But After king g4, Magnus goes bishop d2, but it doesn't matter. Alireza has lost on time. So how does one of the world's best blitz players, even at 16, lose on time in this position 3 pawns up when he's got 2 seconds increment on the clock? Well, let's take a look at these final moves, courtesy of ChessBase India here, and just while you're watching these to see what happened, shout out to Aim Chess, sponsor of this video. If you're looking to skyrocket your rating in 2023, then they are the best chess improvement tool out there right now, because they'll take your game data from Lichess or chess.com, pull it in, analyze it, and produce a report showing you where you need to improve. So check out the link below. You can sign up absolutely free, give it a go, and if you like it, you can then use the code EPIC at checkout if you want to go premium and get a great discount. So it was Alireza's slip that caused him to lose the game on time. However, the arbiter on the spot declared the game a draw. Now, why would he do that? Well, because Magnus only had a king and a bishop, and that's not usually enough material to checkmate the white king, then that would usually be declared a draw because yes, you've won on time, but you don't have checkmating material. However, Magnus protested that ruling, and it turns out he was correct to do so, as we can see through this sequence of moves here. So it turns out that black can checkmate the white king using just the bishop and king if white does a lot to help out the cause, such as under promoting to a knight. So the game was ruled in Magnus's favour, but Alireza was not happy. So his first grievance was with the idea that this could lead to a checkmate for black. But when he was shown how it could, plus shown the ruling in the rulebook, he accepted that, but then the second piece of drama kicked in. So he claimed that Magnus Carlsen was muttering under his breath when Alireza was very low on time, and that distracted him. And he was so set on this point that he then wrote this appeal letter challenging the decision. So it begs the question, did Magnus mutter under his breath to put Firouzja off? Well, this is the key moment that Firouzja is referring to. And yes, you can see Magnus is unhappy and mutters, but Alireza should have stopped the clocks in that moment and made a complaint. Because he did so after the fact, after the game was lost, this caused FIDE to then reject his appeal, and a key result it was too, because it then allowed Magnus to come joint first with Hikaru, and he ultimately went on to clinch first spot outright after a tense tiebreak, which he won. If you enjoyed this one and want to see another incredible chess game by Magnus Carlsen, then check out the video on screen. Thanks for watching and see you soon.